What's up everybody, my name is Akram and in this episode we're going to be taking the time to switch over from code to design. I'm trying to speak into this as best as possible because that mic is currently just jacked up for me. Hopefully it's autofocusing. We're winging this. Half the time I don't know what I'm doing. So anyway, we're switching over to a design project in this series and we're going to be using Framer Web to create this prototype that you see on the screen. We're using Framer Web only, right? So the cool thing about it is that it's a UI tool as well as a prototyping tool, and it allows for code using React, which is honestly really neat, especially for this channel since we're heavily focused on react.js. Now the cool thing about Framer Web is that it is free, so there's no charge on it. They do have Framer X, which is a desktop version, but I really don't like it and it costs money, which we don't want that. So go ahead and head over to framer.com and sign up. From there, we'll start from the dashboard screen where we'll learn how to create the prototype that you saw earlier. Don't forget to like and don't forget to subscribe if you do enjoy this video. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Now to get things started with Framer Web, you want to go over to framer.com and sign up. Once you've signed up, you'll be taken to the dashboard screen. I don't have the dashboard open up just yet, but I just want to break down this project real quick. We are going to be using really just 3 artboards. One is that home screen, the other one is the scroller, and then the search screen. So if I was to go through this app real quick, as we scroll down, you could see that the header takes shape, and then if we scroll down enough, it would go away. But if we scroll all the way up and select search for goodies, it will then take us to the search screen where we can search for anything we want really. We also have the recent searches, and then if we hit cancel, it would take us back. So this is using the, I believe it's called Magic Motion. So it's very similar to what we would call auto animate in Adobe. So Magic Motion auto animate does the same thing where you could define or design the states and then sort of animate between those 2 states. Okay, so to get things started, we're gonna head over to the dashboard screen. And then from here, we'll create a new project and we'll store this project in the team of Akram. Now you can create teams here in the left section where it says my team, and it allows you to create different folders where you could store the different projects you create. So we'll go ahead and create a project now. And once we've created our project, we can select frame. And with frame, we can then define an artboard or a device. So we're gonna go ahead and select the iPhone 11, which is the 414 width and the height is 896. I'm not gonna get very detailed in terms of breaking down Framer, and that's because when you sign up, they have a really terrific onboarding process that you can follow, and I'm sure they can describe the tool a lot better than I can. But as you follow along, I'm pretty certain you'll get familiar with it and you'll learn as you go. So once we've selected a frame, we'll create the artboard, and then when it comes to creating additional sort of shapes such as a button or a card, we'll reference the frame as well. For this to take shape and look like an iPhone, go ahead and select this plus icon, which is an insert, and we can search for iPhone X Kit. The home button has options, so the options we could do is select a dark option, which will change it to a dark theme. And then let's fit it to have a 414 width. And let's push it all the way towards the bottom. I'll hit insert again, and then we want to look for that status bar, so we can search status bar right here, and we can select insert, and for appearance, switch it to dark. Now the status bar, we can stretch it out to fit the full width, and then we can push it all the way to the top. Let's set it to 414, like so. Now one thing that's a bit iffy here is that the status bar and the home button don't really come for the iPhone 11, they come for previous versions of the iPhone. And so that means that the width isn't really up to the dimensions because the X versions have that little black bar here that comes in swoops. So what I like to do is just make sure that I have about 5 pixels of margin or 6 pixels of margin on the right and set left. So we can play with the layout here where it says layout on the top right. And this allows us to add margin to top, bottom, right, 0. If I add a margin of 20 pixels to the top, it will push our element to 20 pixels top. So I'm gonna hit Control Z just so we can push it back up here. One thing I also wanna highlight is this is our preview. So let's fit this to the correct sizes and it will snap into place. Okay, there we go. And what we could do here is if you're using a iPhone, and I don't know if it works for other devices, but we can open it on mobile if you download the Framer X app. You can select this button where it says open on mobile and you can scan the QR code and then view it on your device. We don't really care about this since we're just working in the browser, so we can just cancel that. The very first frame we're working on is that top component where it said the team name as well as the users that are assigned to that team. So I'll create a new frame and I'll give this frame a height of 28 pixels. And we want to center this. So at the very top, you have the align center, and we want to set this to have a margin top of 32 pixels. So let's go ahead and set that. Now it's going to be 32 pixels relative to the artboard, but what I really want is 32 pixels relative to the status bar. So let's fix that real quick. Perfect. I'm going to zoom in, and one thing as well, you could view the margins by selecting the option key on your keyboard. So let me zoom in a bit. Now the padding on the left and the right, what we're doing is setting a standard of 20 pixels left and right. A lot of applications use around 8 pixels, 16 pixels, but I'm kind of getting in between that 16 and 24, so I'm setting it to 20 pixels. One thing to also mention, I may have mentioned it in the intro, we are using an 8-point grid system, and which allows for consistency throughout the project. I'm going to insert text, and what we're going to write is Team Yellow, like so. And the font we're using is Avenir. If you don't have Avenir installed, you can use anything else. But what's cool about Framer Web is it allows you to access local fonts that you have installed, as well as Google fonts, which honestly is pretty insane. The font weight we're going to select is a medium. And I'm not using Avenir next, we're using just Avenir. And we're leaving the font size at 16 pixels. Now I do have this frame here, which we did define, and what frame is going to represent is sort of a container. So if you think about code when you're writing HTML, you kind of have parents, children's, and then siblings, and so on. So the frame is going to be our parent for this container, and what this container is going to be called is a header-team, and we're going to make sure we name everything correctly here, just so that we can have some sort of organization. Now to add this Team Yellow to this header container or header team container, what we could do is we could drag it in this layers, but we can also just drop it right here, and then now it is suddenly just nested, which is honestly really, really cool. To take it out, we could just take it out like so, and it wouldn't be nested anymore. So dropping it in like this, now it is completely nested inside, which is really neat. I want to push this Team Yellow to the far left, so we can select this align left, and we want to make sure that it is centered. So to center it within its container, we can just align center for the vertical like so. Now this is going to be a drop-down, so we need to represent a drop-down arrow. To do that, we're going to rely on feather icons. So using the insert, what we could do is install feather icons, which I already have installed. Once it's installed, we can then search throughout the feather icons package. The arrow that I want is going to be a down arrow, but not this one specifically. I want like a chevron down arrow. So chevron dash dash, or chevron dash down. Go ahead and insert that one. And then we're going to nest it within our header team. Let's zoom in a bit. And we want to resize this. So we're going to resize it down from 24 pixels to 16 pixels. Make sure that it's aligned center. And then we want to set a margin of 2 pixels left from the Team Yellow. Let's go ahead and match the colors. So the black color we're using isn't just the 000. We're going to be using 212121, which makes it a bit of a lighter black color. And with this black color, I want to reuse it several times. So I'll create a shared color and I'll just call it black. Now with the arrow icon, I'm going to double click on it, and then this will change the color of the path of the SVG. So no need to write 212121. We can just select that black color we already created. Okay, perfect. Now we can leave this light blue as our background because we're using it sort of as our base, but we'll get rid of it once we're done. The next thing we're adding is the team members. Now to insert team members, what we could do is create a bunch of circles, and then for our fills, we attach images for our circles, but then that gets a little tedious, and for our team members, we don't really care about the specific images we use. We just want random people. Now we're going to use Unsplash to get those images, and we don't necessarily need to go unsplash.com. We can just insert through a default component, which Framer Web offers. We can search for Unsplash, and there's public packages of Unsplash images and Unsplash. You don't need to install these unless the default component isn't available. We're going to select this default component of Unsplash, so select it and insert an image. And the reason I chose the default component is because the default component allows us to play with the radius while that unsplash images and the public package do not. So you can see that as we're changing the size, the images are kind of set to fit whatever dimension we offer, which is pretty cool. But what we're doing is we're going to set the width to 28 pixels as well as the height. And then we're setting this dead inside this container. And we're changing the border radius to 100 to allow it to be a full circle. Now we don't want a sky, so we're going to search for girl. And this should allow us to display a girl as a user. And what we're then doing is just selecting option and shift to drag to the left, which will create another layer. And we'll do this 4 or 5 more times. Now what I'm doing is I'm making sure that the far left or the end is going to be the center of that image that it's next to. So as we continue, you can see that it's all going to be aligned perfectly. Now it isn't always going to be just all girls in here, so we could jump in and switch boy. And for this one, we could just add man. Okay, so this is awesome in terms of, being able to prototype something real quick, and Framer Web's packages really come in handy. Now to indicate that there are more people that are involved with Team Yellow, we can add a text and we can just say +6 and add this to the end, letting the user know that there is 6 additional people on this team. So make sure that it's pushed to the far right also, and then the margin left of the 6+ or the +6 is going to be 8 pixels. So you're kind of seeing how this 8-point grid is coming into play. Now I'm going to get rid of this background color for our frame, and we're kind of left with this. Now we can introduce that purple color that we're going to create. So we can make a new shared color. And this purple is going to be sort of a mix of a purple and a blue. And the hex code for it is going to be 5131F2. And we can just call this purple, but since it's a mix of purple blue, we can just call it Perlu. We'll go ahead and create that. So we've got this top header area created, and I want to change this real quick. I don't want to display military time, so we can just say time format is 12 hours, and it is currently 10:07 here where I live. We've got this component created. We can then scroll down a bit, and honestly, before we're jumping into the next section that we're working on, or the next part of the header, I am going to format this or organize this a bit more. So I'll group the +6 and all the images into a frame, and we can just select all of them, right click and add frame. Now this frame is going to be called team members, and then we can close this drop down. And then for this team yellow and the chevron, we can select both of them, add them to a frame. It's not letting me add the team. So what if I just select it here? Okay, it works, but it wasn't working there. I guess it's because I was selecting the path of the SVG also. Now this frame can just be called team. Perfect. So you've got header team, and then inside the header team, we've got team members, which is on the far right, and then team on the far left. We can set the far left since we're reading left to right. We'll move on to the page title, and the page title is going to be another frame. We can insert a new frame, or honestly, we'll just select F on the keyboard or this frame, and we can create a new frame here. So this is the container for the page title, and it's going to be 32 pixels. We can insert new text, and our page title is going to be called recent files. Now we're going to bump the font size up to a 28 pixels, and then we're going to change the color to that black color, and we're going to change the weight to black. We can drag it and set it as a child of this container we created earlier. So let's actually name this now. This container is just going to be called page title. And then recent files is going to be nested inside page title. And so since this text layer is not 32 pixels, for the height it's 33, let's change the height of the container to 33 so that it can fit. Now you can do that manually, or there is another option. So let me Control Z real quick. If we set recent files as a child of this page title and we select on page title, we can select this fit content, which will pretty much just fit the content. It'll also fit the content to its width, which we don't really want, but again, we can adjust that. So setting this back to where it's going to be a total width of 375, and then we'll make sure that it is 20 pixels on the left and right, which it isn't on the right, it's 19 pixels. So we can adjust this here and set that to 20 pixels. Now recent files is going to be pushed to the far left like so. And then in the right section, we've got these two icons, which allows us to sort how the user wants to see our files. We've got one for the grid view and then also one for a list view. So let's go ahead and create those. Let's zoom into this section here a bit. We can create a new frame, and this frame is going to be 6 by 6. And we can give this frame a color of black, as well as a radius of 1.5. Now we're creating this grid icon. We're not using a library for it because it's pretty simple. But what this grid icon is going to do is have 4 different boxes, and then each box will have a margin of either left top, top right, bottom of 2 pixels from each other. So it looks like a complete square. We can group all this icon into a frame, and we can call this frame grid icon. I'm going to copy and paste this grid icon to the right section, and then we'll completely delete the ones on the far right, and then we'll stretch this out to fit the parent. But since we're stretching it out, we want to unlock it so that we can only change the width. Now this width is going to have a width set to 14 pixels. This is the time we'll introduce a new color, which is our gray. We can choose custom, and then we can create a new color, which is going to be 74777B. And we're also going to set an opacity of 30%. We want to indicate that this list icon isn't selected. Now I'm going to select this frame, and it also has grid icon, but we're going to change this to say list icon as its parent. Bringing this down to the far right, making sure that it's 20 pixels from the far right of the artboard. We also want to make sure it's centered, so let's go ahead and center it. And then for the grid icon, we want to make sure that it's on the same level, but then the margin right is going to be set to 12 pixels. We can select the background and disable the fill, and we're left with this. If we zoom out, you can see that it looks a bit tight for the margin top, and we can fix that real quick. We can provide a margin top from the recent files or the page title from the team header of 32 pixels, like so. I'm going to select this page title and make sure that everything is named correctly. So this recent files here, we can leave it as recent files. We have grid icon, we have list icon. Okay, everything looks great. We can then scroll down a bit and then move on to the search bar. Now the search bar actually works, it isn't just the UI. And that is done through the help of Framer Web. To insert an input, we can select the insert button and search for input, and it should be located in your default components. We'll select insert, and it will give us this default look, which looks sort of similar to ours, but it isn't as neat, I would say. To adjust this to make it look like how we had it, we're first going to adjust the width. So just stretch it out until it is 20 pixels left and right for the margins, which will equal to a width of 374. It's looking a bit tall in terms of the height, so we'll switch the height from 50 to 40 pixels. Our placeholder, we're going to say search for goodies, and then make sure we add a ... For our text color, we can leave it as is, so it has the 333, or we could select black. It really comes down to you guys on what you think. I'm gonna select black. And then for the placeholder, we're changing the AAA to 858585, which allows it to be a bit darker. The background color is going to be E8, E8, E8. We're leaving the border as is, which it doesn't have a border. The focus color is going to be the same, which is that light blue color. And for our font, we're going to select a custom font, which is Avenir. Font weight is going to be regular. Font size is going to be switched to 14 pixels. And for our padding, we're going to leave it as 12 pixel padding. For our border radius, we're switching it from 10 to 8. And for text area and password, we could leave them as no. This is actually pretty cool. Let's go ahead and enable the password. And if we select here and type, you can see that it has that password value. I think if we select text area, it allows us to hit the enter button and it turns it kind of into a text area. But we're going to leave both of them checked as no. Okay, so we've got the input done. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to create a header component for our recent files in Team Yellow. And to do this, we can insert a new frame and we can have it start from the very top and we can bring it down all the way to sort of this midpoint line. We want to set the bottom margin to an 8 pixel of the recent files. So let's just set the 172 height for now, and then we'll adjust. So this recent files needs to have a margin bottom of 8 pixels. So we can bring this down a bit to where it's 180. And then we'll need to adjust this accordingly. So the team yellow had a margin top of 32 pixels. So we can adjust this to where it has 32 pixels. And then these recent files also had a margin top of 32 pixels. So just adjust it accordingly. Now the bottom was 8 pixels, but it's 11 here. So let's adjust that. Bring it down a bit. Let's see where we're at. Let's bring this 8 here. And then this is 33, and the top is 31. So this will be 32, 32, and then 8 pixels. Okay, perfect. Now this isn't going to be a background color of this light blue. Frankly, it isn't going to be white either. The background color of our entire artboard is currently white, but that's not what we want. Our application has a background color of the following, which is a bit of a off gray bluish. So it's F6, F6, F7. And this means that we need to also change the background color of our artboard, which will also receive F6, F6, F7, like so. Okay, perfect. So now we've got this header component completed as well as our inputs, and it works wonderfully. We can continue in the next episode of adding this grid section as well as the tab bar. And then from there, we can move on to prototyping. This is only part 1. We've got a lot to cover, so I do want to split these up. We're talking about UI, prototyping, all the 9 yards. So just make sure you follow along. And at the end of this, you'll learn how to build beautiful looking apps. If you did enjoy, please leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, have a wonderful day.